Again, I'm Tony Dominguez, and thank you for joining this webinar. Today's webinar is Basic Programming of a Nexus 1500 Plus. So if you're not familiar with what our Nexus 1500 Plus looks like, it's this particular model. The Nexus 1500 Plus can be installed in the horizontal or vertical mount format and has a variety of input options. Has 4 I/O input slots, and you can communicate with it in a variety of ways. We also provide the meter in an enclosure that is pre-wired, so you simply bring in your voltages and your CT wiring and communications. To communicate with the meter, you can use our software found on our website, electroind.com. Select the products link, go to Energy Management Software, and select Communicator, and you can hit the download free version button. So to begin, connecting to the meter using the software. So the meter has a variety of options how to connect to it. Just to go back to the meter here, there is an optical probe that you can connect with, a USB B option, and as I mentioned before, it does have Ethernet here. You can add an additional I/O card for Ethernet, fiber, and serial RS-485. So I will be connecting to a meter on my desk here. So default IP address 10.0.0.1. Again, if you have the serial options, you can connect that way. I'm using network, connect. Oh, much better. Okay, once you connect to the meter, you'll see firmware information, the device logical name that you may have provided it. By default, new meters will have the serial number in the device name, the device type, Nexus 1500 Plus, and serial number. You can expand that or scroll to view more details. You will find on the main page, now you have various buttons highlighted that were not highlighted prior to connecting. So you can see they're grayed out there. I've connected now, so they're highlighted. Here in polling, you'll find various values that are live on the meter. I have my meter connected as a demo, so you are seeing my volts as a line to neutral, line to line, currents per phase, real power, reactive power, current power. You can see the waveforms per phase and volts and amps, and a variety of other options. You can view the spectrum, high speed values. That updates a bit more rapidly versus 1 second. Hit OK to close and go to the next button, energy. You'll get a pop-up. You'll see your energy recorded on the meter. These are accumulated values in the delivered or received in the 4 quadrants. You also have various other tabs here, cumulative demand, I and V squared T, energy, uncompensated energy, Q hours. Okay, you have harmonics. The harmonics will provide you a window here with all the harmonics visible on the meter. You can see per phase, currents, voltages. Select which values you wish to see. You can also see that in spectrum and waveform to give you a good visualization of the harmonics on your system line. Next, we can look at flicker. If your meter has flicker, or the 1500 has flicker, but recording capability if you're monitoring that. Instantaneous, short term, and long term. You can compare your base versus current frequency. Okay, you can view these options as well by simply going to the RealTime, and you'll actually find a lot more read values, or values that are being recorded by the meter or measured. You can find demand again. Here you'll see peak demand, thermal, block, rolling for watts, and bars. Bars, volt amps, block, and rolling. So you can explore more of the options here. If you wish to reset your accumulators or demand, you can reset device information. You'll get a pop-up. You can also reset your historical logs. Here, again, I'll go to Tools, Reset Device Information. You'll get the pop-up. Select which items you wish to reset, accumulators, min, maxes, time of use registers. Select, hit OK, and that will reset it back to 0. One important thing that, or item that a lot of people forget, we manufacture our meters on the East Coast in New York, Westbury, New York. So our timestamp in the meter is currently West or East Coast. I'm in the West Coast, so you can retrieve the device time. I've actually previously reset this or set the meter time, so you can see. So to set the meter to your local time, you can set device time. You can manually set the time or use your PC time. Hit send. You'll get a pop-up time set. If you wish to perform a firmware update, you again go to Tools. You go down to Firmware Update. You'll get a pop-up informing you to retrieve your logs before a firmware update, as this may erase your current logs or measurements. Once you hit OK, you'll get this window. You'll get to select where your firmware files are. You can have your firmware, a COM file, a DSP, and for LCD. The meter does have a touchscreen LCD that shows you your value, so that may also be upgradable. Once you select your file, it'll fill in username, password that can be provided if you don't have it. And simply hit select the start button, and your meter will begin updating the firmware. There may be a prompt. Okay. So again, there are many options under the drop downs here. If you, for additional information, we may cover that in our advanced programming of the Nexus 1500. So next, I will go to Profile. You selecting the Profile button or going to um, connect to the meter or retrieve profile. You'll get the device profile. This retrieves the current information on the meter. As you can see, you have various options here. You expand the general settings to get to the most important settings for your meter, which are your CT-PT ratios and system hookup. Without having the proper settings here, your meter would be producing incorrect measurements. They're inaccurate because you don't have the correct ratings for your CTs. To update, simply double click. You'll get a pop-up. This pop-up includes all the information that's there. On the tree structure, you can update the values, say 400, 4000 to 5, or you have a 480, 277 system, you can do 277, 277. Again, this is if this is a Y hookup, you want to have your line to neutral configuration. If you do select the delta, you can change to still line to neutral. On other meters, you would change it to line to line. So again, you can change the hookup per your system wiring in the hookup section, and you can see the operational frequency of the meter. Next, you can set your time zone. Again, as I mentioned, the meters were configured on the East Coast in New York. You can change that if you're on the West Coast. Say, for example, Washington be -8. If you did have daylight savings going, you can select auto, user defined. You set the begin date and end date. We also have clock synchronization capability, line or iRigby, etc. Very important if you have multiple meters or not familiar with what meter or the meter that's installed on your facility. It's good to always label your meters. So when you connect to a meter, you know what it's monitoring or where it's set if you're viewing remotely. Meter designation, again, by default shows the serial number, but you may be monitoring facility A, for example, or MSB. You want a logical name that represents what is being monitored by your meter. You can also select the power direction here. which quadrant is what, if you're received, delivered, based on if you're a generator, load, facility, power factor. You can also select your preference on the phase angle representation. There's a brief description there. Communications. So in communications, you see limited list here, but double click, you'll get a pop-up that is a bit more substantial. This does have your serial options across the board here, default addresses, and you can modify what protocols you wish to communicate through those ports. One great thing about the R1500 Plus, you can select the meter to do various different communication styles. Say, for example, you have serially connected meters at your facility, and then you are only able to extend Ethernet to 1 meter. You'd want to make it to this meter, and you set your Ethernet gateway. You'd connect physically to this meter, but when you connect using the software, the device address, each meter that is connected serially would have a unique address. That way you can see all your meters on your network through 1 meter, or through the Nexus 1500. Here you can apply your network settings. This particular meter has a second IO card with a network capability as well. So you set that IP address here. You can view advanced settings for the network cards. They're independent, so you can set different network IPs. You can enable, disable web servers. I will cover the web server briefly after. You can enable different or various options here, GE, the EGD, DMP, or disable if you wish to disable. You'll notice some options will highlight. They're currently gray. Auto, now that it's highlighted, so you can modify that. So depending on your needs, we have various options for you to enable or to disable, also per your security requirements for your facility. On the serial ports, you can select the various baud rates. We go up to 115200 and down to 1200 baud, or 4800 baud. You can change the transmission delays as well. So that covers the majority of the settings in the general settings. You do have a DMP capability on this meter, so you can have a custom Modbus map. You can select your number of cycles for your high speed values. to update, configure your log sizes. And the next field is revenue and energy settings. Here you can update your energy scaling based on your preferences for the number of digits to view. You can default 8 with 2 decimal places with a maximum of 9 digits. You can perhaps change it to no decimal places, and your large generator, change it to megawatts for your units, etc. You can do global values that would implement those settings across the board for those values. You can also view compensated and or that was compensated, view uncompensated values, Pulsar Communications, whatnot. Again, a lot of these features will be delved into a bit more in tomorrow's or the next presentation on advanced programming of the Nexus 1500. Just briefly giving an overview. Here you have power quality alarms, you have limits, high-speed inputs, training profiles. You select your logs. The intervals tell you, you select how often to record the values, and in the logs you get a pop-up. You select which values to record. If you have external I/O modules, you would do your configuration here. Option cards. The meter has the particular meter that I have has digital inputs and relays. You can double click and you configure the settings. You want to record perhaps what the proper labels. I'll give it a logical name where that input is coming from, and normal state, labels, normal state, etc. So that covers my basic um, introduction of the meter configuration. As I mentioned, briefly show you the web server. Here you'll see the various values that are found on the meter through the software, but on a web page, simply input the IP address of their meter and you'll be reading live values from the meter. Again, that will be covered further in detail in the advanced programming of the Nexus 1500. For now, I am completed with the basic programming of the Nexus 1500. I'll open it up to the Q&A. Thank you for joining me on this webinar.